long, titled Overnight Success. Please welcome Rupert Hart. Oopsie.
Here in Silicon Valley, we're used to the idea of overnight success. I've actually stood next to, by accident, well, not by accident, Larry Page of Google, before he was famous and rich and a billionaire. But only 2 years later, he was a billionaire. But he didn't know it, probably, and I didn't know it, but 2 years later, he was a billionaire. We read the stories about Facebook. We read the stories of people like Carl Djerassi, who's now a Stanford professor, but at 27, he invented the female contraceptive pill, which has obviously changed the lives of many people. However, reading a book recently about discoverers, inventors, and entrepreneurs, I realized that these are the exceptions. That most overnight success, as Colonel Sanders of KFC would say, yes, they said, "You're an overnight success." He said, "Yes, I'm an overnight success," but it was 20 years in the making. and by the way, we'll get to his little story in a moment. So what I'd like to do is give you some examples and tell you what I've learned from it. The number one thing I'd like you to take away from tonight is, in order to be an overnight success, or even a success of any sort, you really need to accumulate 10,000 chunks of information. Now, there are three ways you can do this. And these are the other things that come part of what I'm going to say. The first is, you need to not give up. And that means time and persistence. The second thing is, you need to be able to cope with tremendous ridicule. And the third thing is, as my entrepreneurship professor would say, you need to live cheaply or cope with poverty, in most cases, which might mean free poverty. So let's go through a few examples, and some of them illuminate all of these all in one go. I was reading a story about a guy called Louis Leakey. You may not know him. Louis Leakey is an archaeologist, actually just died. But he and his wife discovered the first missing link that really explained Darwin's theory of evolution. So if you remember 1850 something or other, 59 I think, Darwin came up with this big book that said we are derived from the apes. Nobody believed him. He was the subject of quite a lot of ridicule as well. But there was no evidence at all. We were looking for the missing link. We had apes that were alive, we had humans that were alive, we had humans who were dead, we had apes that were dead, but there was nothing in between. Until Louis Leakey and his wife Mary. So they lived out, Louis Leakey was the son of some priests over in Kenya, in East Africa. So they lived in this area. Turns out to be, by chance, the absolutely perfect place to find human fossils. He was sent off by his parents off to Cambridge University, so one of the most rigorous programs for anthropology. Came back, and he says, "I believe mankind's ancestor will be found in this valley." And everybody says, no, it'll be in Asia. Everybody knows that. So he suffered a lot of ridicule. For 20 years, he and his wife basically lived in absolute poverty, just digging around, looking for fossils. Well, they found a few little fossils, but not enough to do anything, to really change anything. And then one day, Louis was sick, and his wife, Mary, went out to this river creek bed and started looking around. And she discovered by chance what looked like half a skull sticking out of the sand. She realized it had human dentition, human teeth, realized that she had something fantastic, went back, woke up Louis, dragged him out there, and they discovered the first hominid skull. So human beings have been around for 100,000 years as such, but the missing link is millions of years back, and they found this thing 2.8 million years old. And from that, they were able to change the course of how we see things. And it took them 20 years of absolute poverty and against a lot of ridicule to do that. Other people have also persisted. We all know the story about Edison. When he was coming out with the light bulb, tested 10,000 things, including some pretty crazy things. But he was like, I have not failed. I have just found 10,000 things that didn't do the job. One day I'll find the solution, and he did. And we are the beneficiaries of it. So, other people who haven't given up. I told the story, maybe you've heard it, about a guy called Harlan Sanders. Harlan Sanders discovered King Tutankhamun in 1926. So he was an archaeologist. An archaeologist survived really by finding patrons to pay for your bills and your expeditions every year in the Nile Valley. And he wanted to find a pharaoh's tomb that had not been pillaged. Well, the Valley of the Kings is a very compact area with an awful lot of tombs, and it's been gone over many times. But he was sure there was something there, but he couldn't seem to find it. And he managed to find a patron, a guy called Lord Carnarvon, who would spend money with him. But after 6 years, he says, you know, I'm done. You haven't found a single thing of anything worth doing. He says, no, give me just one more year, just one more year. So the guy said, all right, just one more year. So the guy went out to the Nile Valley with his guys. He had 6 weeks left to go, and he hadn't found a single thing. And then he says, well, wait a moment, we never checked that little bit there. So they went back, and they dug away, and 3 days later, they found a stairway going down. And they said, well, this is interesting. So it's dug away, and then they found this wall. So he says, I got something good. So he telegraphed Lord Carnarvon and said, come on over. So for 3 weeks, they just guarded this place. Lord Carnarvon turned up. And they dug away the last foot of dust for this foot. And so the guy is now looking down, there's a little seal on it. He starts to decipher the seal, and he realizes, oh my God, I have found the tomb of an unknown pharaoh, a pharaoh that was a very minor pharaoh. And there's nothing around it that shows it's been pilfered. So they dug through this wall, and they found there's a whole hall full of bricks and things that had fallen down. So for 2 weeks, they worked through all these bricks, and finally they get to another wall, and again with seals and everything, again unbroken. And so they hack away a little corner. So there's the archaeologist looking through. The candle is here. The ancient wind is coming through like this, and flickering the candle. And then he looks in. He can hardly see anything. His eyes adjust. He looks in, and all he can see. And so he said, well, nobody can. No. They say, well, what can you see? What can you see? He says, all I can see. He says, can you see something? He says, yes, gold, everywhere, gold. So this guy was 6 weeks away from giving up and being nothing. And then he turned out to find one of the most undiscovered, unplundered tombs around. So persistence, ability to cope with poverty, ability to cope with ridicule, enables you to gather those 10,000 chunks to become an overnight success. Mr. Toastmaster.
Take a minute to write down comments for